evening, wherever you are. This is Sally Amber EDD on the Google Hangout on Air simulcast on YouTube called Changes, Conversations Between Authors. This is episode 31, and it is May 20th, 2015. I am so excited to have on my show someone all the way from Scotland, Mary Smith. Say hi to everybody, Mary.
Hello, everybody. I'm very excited to be here.
And I love it that you have what we call an accent, but I'm sure I have what you call an accent. So here we both are speaking in our accents, and that's very enjoyable, don't you think?
It is, and we can both understand each other.
Yes, we're very lucky. But if you start speaking Gaelic, I will be lost. Do you know Gaelic?
Not really. Just a few words, but I don't speak the language, no.
Okay, so then we'll both be okay with English. So tell everybody who's watching now or in the future, tell us a little bit about Mary Smith today. What's going on for you, and how did you get to be where you are?
Okay, that could be quite a long story. How did I get to be where I am? I'm a writer, a journalist, a poet. I think it was something I always wanted to write. I was a great reader as a child, and I think I wanted to bring that magic to other people, to be able to tell stories that other people would want to read. So I probably plagiarised Enid Blyton and so on in all my first endeavours. And then it just didn't happen, and I went off and did other things. So for 10 years I worked for Oxfam in the UK. And then I went to work in Pakistan and then Afghanistan. And it was really when I came home on leave from Afghanistan, and I wrote an article for a magazine and sent it off, and it was accepted. And I was so excited. I can't begin to tell you how excited I was. The acceptance letter was worn to nothing because I kept opening it and reading it. And
now, hold on a second. I just have to stop you because that is a marvelous story for anyone who thinks you have to start out at the age of 20 and be a writer for your whole life or else it doesn't work. Because by the time you were whatever age you were, you'd already been a professional for at least, what, 10, 15 years?
Yeah.
And so you were well into your 30s or 40s when you had your first piece published?
I was in my 30s, yeah. And
so that's not the beginning of anybody's career, and yet it was the beginning for you. So that's great.
Yeah, I think. When I got the letter, it was an article about riding a horse in Afghanistan, because as a child I'd wanted a pony. We couldn't afford it, all the usual. And suddenly in Afghanistan I got the opportunity to ride a horse, and they seemed to have got awfully big, and they had big. And they didn't do what I wanted them to do. And so I wrote, it was quite a humorous piece. And I remember when they paid me, and I thought, oh, I could just sit down and write an article like this, 2 or 3 a week, and I'd be rich. And it was another 2 years before I sold an article again. But
how many did you write in the interim, though?
Sorry?
How many did you write?
Oh, I don't know.
Did you write 2 or 3 a week?
No, probably not, because I was on leave, and so when I went back out to Afghanistan, I was working. But I did keep on writing, and eventually got the next one accepted, and it gradually became a bit easier. But
and all of these at first were more like a memoir or more journalistic, not fiction, correct?
Yes, the first few were very much non-fiction, based on things that were happening to me in Afghanistan. So some of them with a touch of humour. And that went on until I came back to Scotland. And then Taliban came to power, and suddenly humorous articles just didn't really seem appropriate anymore. And it was at that point I had to decide, well, I can't spend my entire life writing about Afghanistan. I have to find other things. And so I veered off and wrote about local history and various things, and then became a full-time journalist on the local paper.
Wow. So you were in Afghanistan after the Soviets left and before we invaded in America. We invaded in 2002, I think.
Yeah, I went out the year the Soviets left. They left in February and I went in July. Impeccable timing. And then I came back in '96, just before Taliban came to power. So there was those years that Taliban was in control before the Twin Towers, which triggered off the invasion.
And have you been back recently?
It's not recently now, but I have been back. We weren't going to go, obviously, when Taliban was in power. And even afterwards, we didn't feel very safe. Every time we thought about going, we would switch on the television and there would be another bomb going off somewhere. However, friends, my great friend Jawat, his family and my family have been very, very close for almost 30 years now. And he emailed to say he had arranged a big family holiday. And because we had backed out, we had missed this. And he was really quite cross with me. And he said, "What do you think is going to happen to you? Why do you think it's a problem coming here?" So I did feel very, very selfish. And we booked a flight and we went out and it was fine. There was no problem at all. And we still managed the big tour with the extended family, which was great. So we met up with a lot of old friends, which was lovely.
Did you get to ride a horse again?
No, I didn't. No, I think my horse riding days are over.
And when you came back to Scotland, did you get to ride horses?
No, I didn't. I thought about it because there are riding stables not very far from here, but no, I think I had accomplished my childhood dream, and so that was enough.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So I've never been to that part of the world. I've actually never been to the UK or Europe or any of the Soviet Eastern countries up there at all. I've been to Australia, I've been to the Philippines, and I've been to Niagara Falls and Montreal and Canada. That's about it. The rest of my travel's all in the USA. So you're a lot more traveled besides Afghanistan and Pakistan. Have you been other places?
I have, but mainly for holidays rather than traveling. I mean, Pakistan and Afghanistan, I had 10 years in those two countries. But I've been to India a couple of times, Ghana in West Africa, and last year I went to Vietnam, which was pretty amazing. A friend's husband was working out there. He's a water engineer. And so I had the opportunity to go out and visit. And it was only 2 weeks, but I really would love to go back. It was a fascinating country. And in 2 weeks, I only saw a tiny, tiny bit of it.
Yeah. I have some friends who spent some time there recently because one of them, her childhood love, was killed there. She's old enough for him to have been in the war in Vietnam, serving the United States. And 40 years, 50 years later, I don't know how long later, she went to see where he had been and where he had died and to take something and put it there from his family. And it was very meaningful for her. Yeah. And it was quite a journey because, you know, Vietnam has really changed since the United States left and all those things happened. So it's become quite a tourist attraction, I guess. It's really very much of it is quite beautiful.
It is. I don't know quite what I had expected because I'd never travelled anywhere there before. But yes, it was very, very beautiful. But I imagine for your friend, it must have been quite an emotional journey back.
Well, it was, but it was also something she could appreciate. She's done a lot of traveling, and I think she felt really responsive to the environment and to the current state of the culture, which is very open, and the people are incredibly kind and generous and receptive to tourism. And, you know, it was like if you didn't know there had been this horrible war, you wouldn't know now, unless you went to the places that were still ruined. You know, if you deliberately sought those out, she said, then you would know. But most of it's been completely rebuilt or grown over, and you can't tell.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And the
So
people were very open. There seemed to be no resentment somehow. It was quite extraordinary.
hard to believe, but yeah, I guess not. I don't know. I don't know how I'd feel if I were one of those people. I would probably not be so quick to let go, but some of them
Mm.
have, and a lot of them live in this country now. Do you have a big Vietnamese population in Scotland?
Not so many in Scotland, but I can remember when the boat people, they were always referred to as the Vietnamese boat people, arrived in the UK. Um, that was when the Americans pulled out and the South had lost the war, and so a lot of people from the South came to UK and to America and Australia and other countries. I
Yeah, we
think.
had a lot too.
Sorry.
We had a lot of Vietnamese people and Cambodian people and people from Laos
Yeah.
fleeing their countries and coming to America, and America letting them in, interestingly.
Mm.
And certain church groups were sponsoring them, and temples, synagogues were sponsoring families.
Right.
And I lived in New Hampshire at the time, and there was a whole lot of sponsorship going on. And I ended up being one of the ESL teachers for some families who had recently arrived. ESL is English as a Second Language.
Yeah.
I think now it's called EFL or TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages or English as a foreign language. But anyway, these families were new to English and new to America, and so I was one of the people helping them acculturate.
Mm. That'd be interesting.
It was really interesting, and two of the families had kids my son's age, who was in his toddler years at that point. This is the early 1980s. And we all came and we played together and hung out, and he ended up going to school with some of those kids when they got older. But what I didn't know, and the reason I had to stop doing it, is that one of the families had brought their grandmother with them, or she had come with them, and she had tuberculosis. And they hadn't been doing any testing at that point, but some of them started coughing when I was visiting during some of my visits, and I went to my tutoring supervisor and I asked her, like, does anybody see these people? Do they have a doctor? I didn't know what their medical situation was at all. And the home health care people came and tested them, and it turned out she had active TB, and one of the other people did too. And even though we tested negative, they told us not to go back to the families' homes because they were very much contagious.
Yeah.
And I felt really badly about that. I wasn't even sure they knew enough English to understand why I couldn't come back.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they got treatment.
Yes, I think they did, and I think that was still at a time when the treatment worked. Right now there's a lot of tuberculosis that's resistant to treatment, which is very scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have one visitor right now who's making herself known. I just want to say hi to Margarita Crystal Lotus. Hi, Margarita. Thank you for coming. Margarita is not in the United States usually, I don't think, either, so she's probably glad to have somebody from the UK coming into our show. And tell us a little bit, Barry. I'm interested because we talked beforehand, before we went live. We call that talking in the green room. And we talked about different things we could talk about. And one of the things we were going to talk about was how a writer makes a decision about what genre to put our thoughts into, whether we write science fiction, whether we write some other kind of fiction, whether we write creative nonfiction, straight nonfiction, memoir. How did you decide as you were picking out the different things you were going to do, which genres, or when to write poetry? How do you do that?
Okay. I wrote nonfiction first, and I wrote a memoir about the time in Afghanistan. The first of those is in a drawer somewhere, because when I looked at it, it was really just a sort of diary. It was a chronological. I did this and then I went there, and then I tried again and decided to concentrate just on one period of time rather than the whole time that I'd been in Afghanistan. And so, yeah, the non-fiction book came out, and then I started to think, well, not everyone reads non-fiction. A lot of people prefer to read a novel. And I thought I might be missing out on an audience through just keeping it as non-fiction. And that was what made me decide to write a novel. plus there was lots that I hadn't put into the non-fiction book, and I thought, well, through fiction I could get a bit more in that would maybe appeal to a different audience. So I don't know. I enjoyed the non-fiction, and I think I feel comfortable with it. But then with the fiction, there's something rather lovely about being able to make it all up, and you know, you don't have to be. I think when I was writing the non-fiction, I felt I had to be really truthful. And of course, I couldn't always remember word for word conversations that had happened 10 years before. But it was important to me. Whereas in fiction, you don't have to worry about that. You can just make it up. And I think my next book would probably be. I would like to do a second fiction book about what happened to the people in the first one.
So a sequel.
A sequel, yeah.
A sequel to the book. I'm sorry.
A sequel to No More Mulberries.
Yes, because The Drunk Chickens is the one that's nonfiction. So right. If you have a sequel to No More Mulberries, I'm just making a joke here. I don't know what that would be because you've already run out of mulberries.
I know, I can't call it More Mulberries. I'll have to think of something.
You'd have to call it Having Pie Anyway or something like that. All right, well, I want to show people that you also write poetry because I think that's very interesting. We're going to try screen sharing here. I hope this doesn't crash my computer or the Hangout. And here's a little bit of your website showing up, your poetry tab. And tell us about this photograph.
Right.
Can you see it?
I can see it now, yes. Yeah. Buzkashi. I mean, Buzkashi is the national sport in Afghanistan, and it makes polo look like a children's game. It's very wild and very rough. And I actually got totally addicted to it in the winter. Every Friday I would go and watch the Buzkashi match. Took me a very long time to work out the rules, but eventually I got there and I could follow it. So
it's kind of like a wilder version of polo?
Yeah, I mean, it starts off with a carcass of a goat in a circle, and then one of the riders grabs it. That's what it. Booze is goat in Durry, and kashi is grab. So the game is actually called Grab the Goat. And once they've grabbed it, they have to gallop all around a huge area, field, and try and get it back into the circle. And in the meantime, all the other riders are trying to grab the goat off the one who's got it.
So it's a little bit like Capture the Flag in that way, except it's Capture the Goat. Well, how about if you read us this poem that you wrote about it, because that looks really interesting to me.
Okay.
And feel free to put in sound effects.
Like my coughing. Sorry. Okay, Buzkashi. Rearing, wheeling, plunging, urged by leather-booted heels, a rugby scrum of horses. Whips and hooves, knife-sharp, slice frozen winter air as rising dust meets sweat and steaming breath. Laws of gravity ignored, a horseman leans, crazy-angled, reins between clenched teeth, and grabs the goat. Men and animals scream defiance. The maelstrom melts, dissolves, a tidal wave of horses. Thundering hooves become thudding heart. Spectators roar approval. Ancestral memory stirred by sounds and sense of victory. No longer taxi drivers, labourers, shopkeepers. They are Genghis Khan's army, streaming, invincible, across Asia's plains. Tomorrow, the sound and fury gone, they'll be shopkeepers again.
Wow. That is so rich with the imagery and the sounds and the feeling of it. And I love how you recognize that, you know, just for this period of time, however long the game lasts, they're not in their ordinary selves. They really are inhabiting these roles, these larger than life, almost archetypical or archetypal roles that are like bigger than regular people, right?
Yeah, that's it. And I think we need that. We need something to make us feel good and powerful at times.
Well, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, just because I'm just a curious Nelly here, is how in the world did you come up with the title, and where did you get this cover for Drunk Chickens and Burnt Macaroni? I just love this cover with this girl. What is she, jumping on the bed or something?
She's dancing. She's dancing.
And then what do drunk chickens and burnt macaroni have to do with anything that you learned or did in Afghanistan? I'm going to show people this while you talk for a minute.
Okay. Well, the drunk chickens came about because in Afghanistan, chickens are not eaten until they stop laying. So they're quite old and very, very tough. So whatever I did to cook chicken, it still came out like boot leather. And then one day I read an article in the Guardian Weekly, a UK newspaper, from a woman in Africa who had the same problem as her. And she solved it by sort of marinating it from the inside, and she gave it wine to drink. So we thought, oh, well, we'll try that. Because when you buy your chickens, you buy them live. So we brought our chickens home from the market, and we got some Uzbek wine from Uzbekistan. And for the last 3 days of their lives, our chickens were very, very happy. We fed them very well. We gave them wine to drink. And it worked. I mean, the meat was so tender. It was slightly pink. Some of the Afghans did ask me how I'd managed to get this pink tinge. And of course, because they don't drink alcohol, I couldn't tell them. But I reckon the alcohol had all cooked out anyways. But that's what we did. We got our chickens drunk, and it tenderized them.
How did you get them to drink the alcohol? Did they actually want to drink it?
Yeah, they loved it. They loved it. I have to say,
they like grapes.
Yeah, maybe.
Wow, that is a weird story. I mean, certainly if I were a vegetarian, that would make me cringe. But I'm not a vegetarian. But it still makes me a little bit uneasy. Like, there's something about that that's a little peculiar, right?
Yes, I wouldn't do it here.
But they do horrible things to animals in the United States. They just, in some states recently, made it against the law to force feed these ducks this horrible way that they do to create a problem, a huge enlarged liver that they then kill the ducks to get, and then they call it foie gras, which is some French thing, but it's really just duck liver, and they make a pate out of it. But they really torment these poor animals, and the goose, they do the same thing to the geese before they die, and they have made that now you can't do that anymore. But they do terrible things to animals anyway to give us what we want to eat. So certainly getting them drunk is the least of the things you could do to them.
They were happy chickens. They were happy.
Yeah, exactly. They were very relaxed. Although we don't really know. Were they acting inebriated at all?
Yeah, they tended to wobble around a bit.
Changed how they could walk. I just don't know if alcohol has the same effect on other species. I've never learned about whether or not it actually gets people drunk the same way it gets animals drunk, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't try it out on any pet animals. But I think for the chickens it was okay. And the burnt macaroni was because our office in Mazar Sharif, the cook was very unadventurous. And once he had the same menu every week. It was the same thing, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You knew what day of the week it was. And Wednesdays was macaroni. And it was just plain boiled macaroni with a few slices of tomato through it. And it wasn't very pleasant to eat. And then one day he burnt it. And he was very upset. He was very worried we were going to shout at him because he'd burnt the macaroni. But in fact, we were all fighting over the crunchy bits at the bottom of the pan because they were the only bits that tasted of anything.
Ah, So he didn't know that that was actually giving it a good texture and a good flavor.
He did know afterwards because every week he had to burn the macaroni. So.
Because it had cheese on it and made the cheese crunchy?
There was no cheese, no, it was just plain macaroni and a bit of tomato. But lots of oil.
Oh, okay. The oil would make it crunchy. Sure. Okay. Well, you know, that's one of the things I think is a big problem or a big adventure, depending on your palate, is when you go to a place that's got very different culinary habits, different kinds of sources for their food and for their drinks, and then you have to figure out what you like and what you can tolerate. And, you know, I was in Australia. I did not eat any witchetty grubs. I did not eat any of the insects or any of the unusual kinds of small animals, but I did eat crocodile meat, kangaroo meat, which I felt really bad about, by the way, shark meat, trying to think of a few others. Oh, they wanted me to eat, did they? No, they didn't. I was going to say, did they kill kookaburras and eat them? But those are birds, right? No. Koala bears, no. All right, I think those were it. But still, it felt weird, you know. It felt like you've read about these animals or you've heard about them from cute little stories, and then they want you to go eat them, like eating Bambi or something. I don't know. It was weird.
What did kangaroo taste like?
Well, you know, they did it at this barbecue situation, and they pretty much all tasted the same. And the joke, of course, is when you eat anything that's unusual, you're supposed to say it tastes like chicken.
That's right.
Even if it doesn't, you know, because that's supposed to make everybody feel more relaxed about eating it. I don't think it tasted like any chicken I've ever had, but it tasted like regular cow meat or other kinds of pork, or not so much pork, but more like cow meat. They have different cattle over there than we do, so when you eat, more like the UK cattle, actually, because most of the settlers that came to Australia early on and brought their stock came from UK countries, Ireland and England, and I'm not sure about Scotland. Did Scottish people go to Australia too?
I think so, yeah.
And Wales, Germany. Yeah, so they brought their stock with them, and so that's the kind of flavoring that a lot of things have there. But I always thought it was odd, you know, when people come to this country, they want to eat American food. But there is no American food, because we have a country of different kinds of cultures and people who came from all over the world, and then we have all different tribes of Native Americans, and not any two of them eat the same.
Yeah.
Or do the same thing with the same ingredients.
Yeah.
You know? So give the same people the same ingredients who come from different cultures, and they won't make the same food.
No. But I think that's what's interesting about American food, is that you have got that huge mix from all different nations. Yeah.
Well, I know that people have a hard time understanding what American culture is because it is such a mixture. And I don't think there is an American culture. I think there's a westernized compendium of different elements that we call Western industrialized culture that a lot of countries are part of. Would you say?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's a country's culture is very often difficult to pin down.
But when you have a tiny little country like Scotland that's been almost completely able to maintain some things about itself, what would you consider the food of Scotland? Like everybody hears about haggis, right?
Right, yeah.
But there are other things, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we do eat haggis, and we don't only eat it on Burns Night. It's traditionally eaten on the birthday of Robert Burns, but you know, we eat it at other times as well. The Scots are well known for their baking. We do lots of baking, scones and pancakes and things like that. Lots of seafood, because you know, we're more or less surrounded by water. You're not far from the sea wherever you live. So lots of seafood. Yeah, I suppose it's less adulterated than other food cultures. But it's only now we're starting to see that and to be proud of it.
Yeah, that you've had some ability to stay intact, so to speak. Now, you live in an area that is or is not right near the ocean?
I'm about 20 minutes, half an hour away.
Oh, I consider that close. And then is that the kind of ocean water that you can never swim in because it's always freezing, or can you go in it at any point?
People do go in it. It's usually too cold for me, but yeah, no, people do swim in it. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's never warm. It's never warm.
I grew up here and I came back here after not living here for 42 years, here being St. Louis, Missouri in the United States, which is, if you go downtown, is right alongside this very, very wide, 2-mile wide at that point, Mississippi River. And I've lived a lot of other places. And there are a lot of lakes and ponds here. And when I lived out west, I lived in New Mexico for 2.5 years, and I lived in Northern California for about 11 years. And those two places are going through a horrible drought almost the whole time I was there, getting worse and worse and worse, you may have heard, especially in California and the Southwest. And whatever water they used to have, they had less and less of it as I was there. And what they call rivers there, I would just laugh at. We would just call them creeks or streams in Missouri. And they called everything a river unless it was dried up most of the year, and then they would call it an arroyo or a creek. But I was just missing water, and I didn't realize how much I was missing it till I came back here this summer. And now every time it rains, every time, I'm so grateful. I still feel that sense of parchedness that I was feeling in California and New Mexico. I used to go running around when someone turned on their sprinklers because I could smell the water and I wanted to go stand next to it. So I don't know what those people are going to do. It's really, really getting scary over there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we have we don't have that problem in Scotland. We have more than enough.
Opposite, right? You got lots of rain, right?
Lots of rain. But that's why it's green. It's so beautiful and green.
Well, you know, we were talking earlier about why I would write science fiction. You said you admitted with some chagrin that you're not a fan of science fiction. I will forgive you. And not everybody is. But I have to tell you, have you ever read Ursula Le Guin?
Do you know, to my shame, I haven't. And yet a colleague many years ago used to rave about her books and said I should read hers because it would convert me. But
well, I want to suggest that you either read her stories or Kate Wilhelm, Wilhelm. And the reason I recommend either of them, there are lots of other ones I would recommend if you like them, but they write something that really is just fiction, that has elements of the future in it or elements of the alternative past or future, or just socially speculative elements that we don't know if they're going to happen or not. But so does all fiction have speculation in it, right? And Ursula K. Le Guin is very famous for talking about the segregation of science fiction and how offensive that is to her. That she considers it all just literature, and nobody should have ever segregated it, and it's a bit of a put-down, the way that libraries and bookstores and others have put it into its own little category. And she resists that all the time because she's writing social science fiction is what term I've heard used a lot. And that's the kind that I'm writing, which is looking at the cultures and the societies that we currently have. What could we imagine would happen if changes occurred? And changes being my theme on this show, it's also my theme of my Spanish series. The word change is in every volume's title. And what I'm trying to do is imagine a future that isn't horrible, because there are probably hundreds of thousands of dystopian science fiction books being written and already having been written, and I don't want to read one more word that says how bad things are going to be. Apocalypses and wars and horrible plagues and epidemics and earthquakes and floods. It's like, never mind, okay? I don't want to read any of that. I want to read, what about if things get better? What if they get more interesting? What if we really do develop into better versions of ourselves? And maybe we get some help from other beings from right on this planet and from other planets that we learn to communicate with and can really benefit from communicating with. And we can all collaborate and into a utopian future. Now, there'll be a few bumps and a few conflicts and a few problems, but what would we be like? How would things go? And so that intrigues me. And that's the kind of science fiction I'm writing.
Right, yeah, I agree with you about the dystopian. It just does have no appeal to me at all. We have enough problems without having to make up more. So yeah, I would certainly favour the kind of book you're talking about, where it's hoping that things might get better.
Right, and then we have writers like Brian Guthrie from Germany. Hi, Brian, who was on my show last week. And he writes fantasy, but he also mixes in some science fiction with it. And he also mixes in some of those speculative kinds of what about the future, what about cultural and societal changes, what would happen if. Now, some of his are a lot more dystopian, but some of them look into a future that might be better, or people who tried to make it better, as he says, and then disaster happened because they weren't good at making it better. Lots and lots of utopian attempts, he was saying, and I agree, turn out to be disastrous after a while. And I think Lois Lowry did that in The Giver, and The Stepford Wives is another example of that, where you try to do this thing that you think is going to be a good thing, and it just really backfires, right?
Yeah.
So that interests me. How do people try things, and how do people react, and best intentions are not always going to be realized. Who knows?
And that's true whether you're writing about now or whether you're writing about 200 years in the future.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, how different can people really be? I mean, if we become bionic and cyborgs and all those things, yeah, we might be pretty different. If we start hybridizing ourselves with other species, we might be pretty different. But until that, we're just people. And I'm interested in how we change because things around us change. And things within us can change. And as a Buddhist, I bring in a lot of those parts as well to my books, which have to do with making ourselves into better versions of ourselves all the time by uncovering what's already here. The Buddhist framework has to do with the inherent purity or goodness of every being and of all of this reality that we're a part of, and that we don't necessarily recognize that or utilize that fully, and we need to learn to do that. And that's what meditation and practice are for. That's their purpose, is to help us uncover our best, and everybody else is trying to do that, then we'd be a better place. So, and then back to the dystopia, Brian reminds me of another set of books that are in that fantasy science fiction realm, Deathgate Cycle, where people try to do something really good and it does not turn out well. To say the least. Just going by the title, Deathgate Cycle, you could tell, like, oh, that's not going to go well.
Not a title that would appeal to me.
But it appeals to a lot of people. That's what's interesting.
Yeah.
Especially young people. I would say right now the majority of young adult fiction that is not realistic is dystopian, futuristic fiction. Which to me is very depressing.
But that's possibly because they see the world that they live in and think, my God, it's going to get worse.
And it is, yeah, it is very, very much getting worse from when we were young, and probably even from when they were young. It's getting worse. It is true. In many areas it is. Well, let's get off that topic for a minute, because we'll both just have to sink into a further morass of discouragement. And let's go back into the ideas that we were talking about earlier, that we both overlap in some, like, about theater. So I noticed some of your resources you offered have to do with theatrics and theater and performing. How did you get involved with that in your community?
Oh, I mean, I haven't done much. I was involved with a thing called Red Rose, White Rose, and that was a friend had written a script, but she's also an early musician. So she and her husband play 16th century musical instruments. And so the piece that she wrote was a combination of the music and the script, which was about the time of James IV of Scotland, who was a very enlightened king. But the story is actually about just before the Battle of Flodden, when he gets killed. But it's the night before, and his wife and his mistress are both reflecting on what will happen to their lives if the most important man in it gets killed. It's obviously going to be a lot easier for the wife. She's the queen. for his mistress, she could end up with nothing. So she persuades him, she's trying to encourage him to find a suitable husband for her so that she can marry, and if he's killed, she'll be okay, which she thinks is a bit calculating of her, but that's the way it was. But the wonderful thing about her, and the thing that started Vivian to write it, was that she discovered when she was doing research that this woman, Janet, was paid in shoes. That was part of her salary for being the king's mistress. And she was also called, her name was Janet Beras, because when she and the others were dancing one night, the draft from the chimney blew their skirts up. And that was when the king spotted her. So that was the role I played, which was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, although I'm not an actor. But that was good fun.
Well, that sounds like fun. Brian had one more comment to make about our previous discussion. I just want to put up that he's recognizing that when people are thinking they know best or thinking to play God and nothing turns out how they planned, that can certainly lead to some good discussions and good writing and not necessarily good outcomes, though, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like your story had some different kinds of outcomes in the theater, too, right? The fiction part of it?
Sorry, the fiction.
The story that you were telling, that was the theatrical piece you were in, it had some mixed outcomes.
I mean, we went on tour locally, not just in Scotland, which, I mean, it was fun, but it was a one-off for me, really. It's not something that I would hanker after.
You're not going into a new career as a theater artist and an actress?
No, I would rather write. I would be interested in trying to write something for stage or radio.
I had a very big hankering to be a performer for a long time, and I have done some performing professionally. But I have to tell you a little secret. I am easily bored. It's a lifelong problem for me. And doing the same show many, many times really doesn't appeal to me, especially when it's a very strict scripted show. Now, a lot of the shows I've done were somewhat improvisational, meaning we had a frame and we had cues, but you didn't have to say the exact same lines the exact same way every time for it to work. So I found that to be a little less stultifying, but for the most part, I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could hit that cue and say the same thing over and over and over and over for the camera, which you have to do like a billion times, or even 8 shows a week on a regular theater stage. I would just die of boredom. And that's not a good place for the audience to see their actress just going, oh my God, I have to say this one more time.
No, I agree. It must be very difficult to bring something fresh to it every time, especially when it's a long-running thing. Yeah.
It is. I have a huge admiration for those people that really hone their craft, really do a good job. They're not just performing. They really are acting. And we don't see that they've done this 7,000 million times. To us, it's like they're being that character and they're inhabiting that world. And good for them that they can pull that off. I'm admiring that. I really am. So guess where we are right now, Mary?
Where are we?
We're at quarter of the hour. It is hard to believe, but we are there. Time always flies in this show. I always want more time, and we just do an hour, and it's just never enough. But I'm going to ask you the same question I ask all of my Changes guests because I'm fascinated by each of the guests' answers. They're all different. So here's my Changes question. Given all the local, personal, regional, provincial or statewide, national, global, social, political, environmental, climactic, scientific, artistic, spiritual, religious, any other kind of changes you're aware of, which of those evokes in you hope? Which arouses your fears? What would you like to tell us about your view of changes? Take it away, Mary Smith.
Okay. Let's start with hope. And I think for me, at the moment, it's a very personal and political hope. In Scotland, of course, last year we had the referendum to decide, to say whether or not we should be an independent country. The majority of people, a small majority of people, said no, they wanted to remain part of the United Kingdom. I don't. I think Scotland should be an independent country, and I would like to see that happen in my lifetime. And I think the way things have happened in Scotland since the referendum really do give me hope that that might happen. People have become engaged with politics in a way that they haven't done, certainly in my life. Maybe around the time of the end of the war might have been, but certainly in the last year, people have really, young people, all ages, but a lot of young people. And I think that's hopeful. I think one of the reasons that we didn't win the referendum was that UK politicians panicked when they saw that the polls were giving us a big lead. And they made all kinds of promises, and they made all kinds of threats about the dreadful things that would happen to Scotland if we became independent. And I think that very much swayed people. And then, of course, the promises didn't happen. So, politicians shouldn't think people are stupid. They are going to start thinking, oh, wait a minute, you said this would happen, that would happen. And so I think the fact that now so many people are interested in politics, they realise that this is going to affect their lives. And in the Westminster, the UK elections that we just had on the 8th of May, in Scotland we have 59 MPs who go down to London, and 56 of them belong to the Scottish National Party, who's the party that has always fought for independence. It wasn't, the election wasn't fought on independence. The SNP talked about taking a stance against austerity, because at the moment, benefit cuts are really, really impacting on people. There are so many people who are just, reading yesterday about bin lorries, who take the rubbish away, the refuse, the garbage. They're putting CCTV cameras in because people who are homeless are taking refuge inside bins, garbage cans, and they're being tipped into the thing and have died. And I think I don't want to live in a country that allows that to happen. And so for me, it's the the hope that so many people have voted for the SNP and that they want to make changes that will improve the lives of everybody. And I think I'll end the political party broadcast there. But it is for me at the moment a time of hope. The referendum was devastating, absolutely devastating. And one of the most difficult things I had to do was tell my father, who had dementia. But it was through my father that I first became involved or interested in politics. And I knew that all his life he had wanted Scotland to be an independent country. And in the end, I had to say to him, I'm sorry, we lost the vote. And I could see the disappointment. Fortunately, in a way, because of the dementia, he very quickly forgot about it and we didn't mention it again. But I felt I had to tell him, and I just felt so upset that his life was going to end and he hadn't seen the big change that I hope that I will see before mine. And I suppose going on to fears and what I'm afraid isn't changing, there's a couple of things, well, there's 100 things. Mentioning the dementia, it was a very steep learning curve, because until it hits you, you don't know anything about it really. You read about it, you read stories, but until it's actually affecting you, and then you go on this journey to find out more about it, what you can do to help. And it's really scary how many people in Britain, I don't know whether it'll be the same in America, but I guess it will be, that more and more people are being diagnosed with dementia, younger as well. And we just
all
don't.
Different causes. It's not always one particular cause.
No, there's different causes, and there's different types of. There's Alzheimer's, which is the one that's the most common. My dad had the next most common, which is vascular dementia.
My grandmother had that.
Yeah, but the resources just are not in place. I mean, we need to do so much. Because a person's life the quality of life can be extended for much longer if there's interventions done sooner after the diagnosis. And so that's something where I fear unless we really get to grips with what's happening, this is the demographics changing, and that means putting money into it, but also into the care services, which are at the moment struggling to keep up. I mean, I know when we needed people to come in, it was really difficult to find an agency who could provide the level of care that we needed. People are paid very low wages, just scarcely above the minimum rate. They work long hours, they don't get paid in between jobs, they're running here and there, and it's not right. And I think that's the most awful indictment of society's attitude and government attitude to old people and the whole aging process.
It's the same thing with young people. We pay our youngest caregivers and our oldest caregivers the least amount of money. It's terrible. All the preschool teachers and the young child care, daycare people, they don't get paid very much either.
No, that's true. So, I mean, it's the same at both ends. And if we don't care for our young people and we don't want to care for our old people, then, I can see your dystopian novels might well be true.
And I think what you're bringing up is really important, and so does Margarita. She says that this discussion is interesting. She's appreciating the questions and the answers, and I don't know so much that we're having any answers, but we're definitely having a great conversation here. I'm curious, did you put some of the resources and the learning that you acquired in dealing with your father's dementia on your website that you devoted to him?
No, I haven't. I think because that website, that blog, it's very personal. It's more I've probably complained about not being able to find carers or carers who've come in and not done the job as we wanted them to do. It was more of a personal thing. But yes, I think because at some point I would like to turn that into a book, what's on the blog posts. And I think then I would certainly interweave the personal anecdotes with more of the resources and how to find them.
Well, I think it would be so amazing for you to share that journey of here's what I wish I had found, here's what I wish we had had, here's what we needed, and here's where you can get it somewhere, or hope we could get it later, or you know what I mean? Like just have that, however far you got with it, just to share that with other people who are in the same situation or similar circumstances as yours.
Yeah. Because there are a lot of people. I know through my blog I've made contact with lots of other people in America, in Canada, in the UK, who are in or were in the same position. And it's been really good to have that level of mutual support across the globe, which has been great.
Right. Well, I think there's a triple problem that you've raised. One is the level of care that we want to give the people that we care about who are in our family isn't available from professionals because mostly they're paraprofessionals. They're not really paid as good professionals should be paid. So we don't get a good caliber of people a lot of times. Or we can't get reliable people because they're always changing jobs or moving around or just going from job to job. As you said, they're tired, they're stressed out, they're not well paid for. And then the third thing is because these people are usually in our own family, we've got all those family dynamic issues that are playing out that are really difficult with anyone who's taking care of an aging parent. How much have we dealt with our issues with that parent is now going to be very obvious once we have to take care of them, right?
True. That's very true. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is something that I am fearful of because I don't think the powers that be, the people who can make changes, have actually grasped that it's soon going to be too late. We really need to make these changes now. And there's no career structure for people who become caregivers. You become a caregiver and you do that until you retire, or you go and clean public toilets because it pays you more, or you might be promoted into a job in the office. So the best ones end up being taken away from doing the actual caring because they're promoted into the office, and it's yeah.
It is a big problem. And then we have the other problem here that you might not have so much in Scotland, which is we have these centres, these retirement homes that have been turned into care homes, or we have these 2 or 3 tiered assisted living situations where the sicker someone gets, they can move to a different part, goes all the way up to skilled nursing sometimes. But a lot of these places are horrifyingly terrible. They don't take good care of the people. They smell terrible. They look terrible. You wouldn't want to leave your worst enemy there, much less someone you love. And yet that's all that's available in many places, are these really substandard care homes that are given licenses and allowed to function, but they're just awful.
Yeah, it is the same here. We have, and what astonishes me is that, you know, you have people who go in and check up on these places, but they don't. I mean, we have had cases where they have found things happening, people being abused, being slapped, being hit.
Exactly, or being stolen from or whatever. Well, look, we can't solve that, and we can't solve the politics in Scotland, and we can't solve sexism,
we can.
racism, violence, the Taliban. We can't solve anything in our little hour here, but we have touched on a lot of things, and I really appreciate the value of your visiting with me today and how much I've enjoyed our conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sally. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm not at all nervous now that we've finished.
Oh, well, that's great. I want to remind people of how to get in touch with you, to go to our event page on Google, which has lots of resources you've offered and all your book covers and all of your links and everything else people need to know about you. But go ahead and tell us, spell out the URL for your main webpage, would you?
Yeah, it's www.marysmith.co.uk.
So that's .co, which stands for country, and .uk, which stands for United Kingdom, and it should say Scotland. No, but it doesnn't. Okay.
Can I just say, Sally, for anybody, No More Mulberries, the novel that we've mentioned.
Hold it up a little higher.
There you go. It's actually free at the moment.
Back toward your face more. We can't see it, though. Hold it up by... There we go. It's free at the moment. Wow, where is it free?
On Amazon. Free for your Kindle. Free. It's, the ebook's free. So you can download it on Amazon, either .com, USA, anywhere in the world, I think. If you've got Amazon, you can download it.
Great. So you can go to your website and get the URLs, or go right to Amazon and look up No More Mulberries.
Yeah, that's it.
Read the fictionalized account of your time in Afghanistan, some of it anyway, and get ready for the sequel that we hope you'll work on.
Yeah, I will. It'll take me a while.
And I want to remind everybody that Changes is an almost weekly occurrence, and next week is one of the not weeklies. We're not going to have a show on May 27th, and so hold on to your Changes fixation for another week, and on June 3rd, we're going to have another person coming from the UK, Kerry Donovan, a man, Kerry, Kerry, who is a writer in many different thriller genres, crime genres, psychological thrillers, crime and police procedural thrillers. So that's a different, very different kind of conversation that we'll be having. And I love this show because I invite all different kinds of writers, all different genres and backgrounds to come on, and from all around the world. So we went from Germany to Scotland, and then we'll take a week off and go back to the UK, and I'm delighted with that. So please, if you're interested in being on the show, go to my website, sallyember.com, SALLYEMBER.com, only one Ember. Don't put an S on the end of Ember. And there is a Changes page. You can read all about it at the top, and then scroll down and look for an open date if you'd like to be on the show. you would have to watch an episode or more and make sure it's your cup of tea, and then get in touch with me. All the information you need is on that page. I also have a page there for my Spanner series. My book one, This Changes Everything, is permanently free to get you in and get you excited about utopian science fiction and romantic components and Buddhist components and Jewish components and multiverse aspect with some sci elements of extra special skills. So please check that out. And I have book 2 available for $3.99 called This Is Not, This Changes My Life and My Family Forever is book 2. Book 3 I'm working on. This is not the way I want things to change. And I hope to be done with that sometime at the end of the summer and release that later this year. And book 4 is also in the works. So stay in touch with me. Look at my blog, sallyember.com. Visit our show. And thanks to everybody for visiting now and later. And do you want to say any goodbyes, Mary?
I want to say thank you very much to you, Sally, but also to say I hope Kerry Donovan was listening, because I'll be listening to him next time, because he and I are in the same, we're in a writers group, an online group, support group. So
nice.
Yeah, so I know, I've never met him, but a virtual friend. Yeah.
Well, I want to mention that I got both of you inclined toward my show from Lori Fairley. So I really appreciate her referring new authors to me, I mean. And anybody else that wants to make a referral, please do so. If you don't want to be on yourself, you might know someone who would be a great guest. And just to let you know, I would love to get my books into print. I would love to get these video casts into podcasts. I would love to get a little bit better sound system for my show and a lot of other projects, get new covers or any covers for my new books. And so if you would please look at my patreon.com crowdfunding site, you might make a donation of anything as low as $4 or more and get at least a free ebook or maybe some free editing and copy editing and revising services or even writing tutoring from me for a much lower price by contributing to my campaign than if you paid me outright. Go to patreon.com/SallyEmber, and you'll see me singing a very badly wrought song that I wrote about my projects. Thanks again, everybody, and bye to Mary Smith. Check us out on YouTube and Google+, and go well with your changes.